Hello everybody, Sister Danger here. So it was pointed out to me this video, serious questions for anti-SJWs. And although I'm pretty sure everybody in the quote-unquote anti-SJW community has probably already done a response video to this, after listening to the questions, I felt compelled to do my own response video as well. So I guess I'm just gonna add mine into the pile with everyone else's. There are a lot of questions to go through, so let's just skip right to it.
Are you able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
Although this question seems pretty rhetorical in its phrasing, the answer is yes, I absolutely can see that irony. I think that irony is definitely on a two-way street. This activity happens on both sides of the fence.
What is it with you people and skulls?
Everybody loves a good skull, guy. Every girl crazy about a sharp-dressed skull? Forgot. Anti-SJWs are the shitlords of cultural appropriation. That was a no-brainer.
How do you define right wing?
So I perceive the right to generally be a bunch of old, white, very conservative religious dudes that err on the side of fiscally conservative, but on social issues they tend to have kind of the religious fundy viewpoint, anti-abortion and nuclear family, traditional marriage, and other similar ideas.
Anti-SJWs often have an aversion to being labeled as right wing. Yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left.
So this comment is interesting to me because it makes me wonder what you perceive the right wing as being. My perception of many of these issues that are being brought up and that we see being discussed back and forth on YouTube is that it is not a struggle between the left and the right, it's a struggle between the left and the more left.
Therefore, why is being labeled right-wing a bad thing to you?
While I cannot answer for everybody in the world, I am just going to put this out there as a little bit of a conjecture, but if a person doesn't perceive themselves as being right-wing in the first place, then when somebody is erroneously putting them into this category, I can see why they might reject that and take exception to being called something that they do not perceive themselves as being.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach.
As if these types of catty one-liners are not prevalent on both sides and run the gamut of people. I think this is a really incendiary question that doesn't really serve much purpose to further the conversation. Although I think that the fundamental idea that this guy is trying to get at is actually much better expressed by this gentleman here.
How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, oh, I was just trolling you, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?
Speaking for myself, I do not reconcile these things. And on this particular matter, I am in complete agreement with you. It is not acceptable as some form of argument to, attack a person or their qualities.
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you...
I'm sorry, guy. I'm really having trouble taking that as an actual serious question.
Or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is.
I think that we can safely say that anytime somebody hijacks whatever vision it is that you are discussing and supplants it with their own and then attacks that, it's generally thought of as the straw man fallacy.
Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find?
Challenge accepted. What do you think is the strongest, most robust topic out there that people on the other side of the fence do not address? Put it out there. Let's discuss.
Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the...
The answer is yes, of course. No two people will ever agree on absolutely everything, and that means that every day we all do something in conjunction with other people whom we may not necessarily agree with on every social, political, religious platform or ideology that there is out there. So,
What is third wave feminism?
geez, I'd answer this guy, but I can't because guess what? I've been...
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Neither of those people are representative of the entire group of which they may claim to be as a whole. In common vernacular, people use terms like all or everybody quite a lot, and they are meant as generalizations, not necessarily a literal meaning of all. People just tend to be pretty bad at qualifying the fact that they're making a generalization, generally speaking.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists?
I can't speak for everybody, but I am going to try to hypothesize here a little bit, and I hope you will bear with me. A couple of thoughts on this come immediately to mind. And first is that when somebody doesn't understand something or doesn't know about something, it's pretty common for them to try to find somebody within that realm of familiarity or expertise to whom they can ask their questions. I think there may be a deeper and more alternate reason as well. The person that is bringing up the contention wants to shed light on a particular behavior or activity in such a way as to cause the person they are talking to consider, to truly consider the fact that they have an acclaimed and shared ideology. And is that the sort of thing that they approve of, that they want to be sharing with this other person, whatever this erratic behavior or activity, this questionable thing might be?
Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you?
By all means, ask anything you want.
Why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you?
So this is a pretty interesting, if really convoluted question, and I think that's because it gives rise to some other questions like, what exactly should be done, if anything? Should we be trying to censor the speech of other people, or should we be trying to shape an environment through how we behave ourselves?
Do you deny that systemic racism against Black people is like a thing in general?
Even though this guy goes on in the very next sentence to flippantly write off anybody that would in fact deny that systemic racism against Black people exists, I am going to answer this question as if it was serious, because I think it's a really good question. I think that this question is oversimplified and does not very well encapsulate the relationship between people and the systems that people create. Now, we have the ability to create very biased systems, and we have the ability to create systems that are less biased. Now, I do think that we have a pretty robust justice system, and that is grounded in very solid philosophies when it comes to equal human rights and the blindness of the justice system, how the law should be applied equally to everybody. I think that ideal definitely is in the forefront of the systems that we create. That is what we strive toward, and it is not out of the minds of people. I do not think, though, that that's how it plays out, because ultimately, even though we may set up a justice system wherein we try to deal with cases on an objective basis and apply the law, it's still people that are operating these systems, and people still will have their biases and prejudices. So I'm really reticent to say that the system itself is the thing that is biased. I think we have a pretty good set of laws and systems in place to try to handle things in our society objectively and fairly, giving people equal opportunity, etc., etc. Is it perfect? No. But I think that more than the system is flawed, the people that are in the system and that are operating that system are flawed.
If you've ever discussed or done a video about black-on-black crime,
I haven't.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
Again, I think this is a really good but extremely complicated question and not one that has a golden ticket answer. There are a lot of things that go into even the idea of equality of opportunity, even though I definitely err towards liking that philosophy. There, of course, are a lot of imbalances, but we must take also into mind who is responsible for opportunities and in what areas and at what levels. And what I mean by this is that never will there be 100% equality of money, of situations, of upbringings, of resources. Never will these things be 100% for the 350 million Americans that exist, let alone the 7 billion people that are on our globe. And we have to be careful, because when do we place the responsibility of the creation and maintenance of that opportunity on society and the government versus on the individual and the parents in a household? Is society responsible for making up for the shortcomings of a family where there is alcohol or drug abuse? Surely those things are bound to lead to a detrimented opportunity for the child or children in those households. This is a really complicated question, and I wish that in the course of this video anyway, I could answer it, or at least try to answer it with something of a more comprehensive response.
Do you understand basic English syntax? Like, if I say this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty.
Yes, I do. Was that actually your legitimate idea of a serious question that is meant to bridge the gap between two arguing sides in order to create an open discussion?
Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
Actually, all rhetoric aside, no, I don't get it. I don't understand why it is racially insensitive or ridiculous to say that.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid?
I don't personally think that a man who is a feminist automatically equates to a beta male, and anybody who would make a blanket statement like that is more or less flagging themselves coming out the gate that their strongest argument that they've got is to skip immediately to ad hominem. Pretty weak.
If that was the case, wouldn't I attempt to get laid from my views?
Yeah, that'll get him in.
Perhaps I am showing my YouTube naivete, but what does that even look like? Is that a thing that people do? I mean, actually do. Like, what does the guy look like that uses YouTube subs in order to get laid. What is this guy, like the Gaston of YouTube? Like, when I was a noob, I had just a few subs, and I did shoutouts to help me get large, and now I'm a veteran with 400k, almost as much as Sargon of Akkad.
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community?
Based on actual personal practice, almost certainly not. I am a pretty strong advocate of people's right to say whatever they want, no matter how hateful, bigoted, biased, chauvinistic, prejudiced it is. So I am not too keen on trying to speech police other people, even if I don't, almost especially if I really don't agree with it. So I'm about to engage in some language here for the sake of example, but if I was to witness a conversation and a person in that conversation was to skip to starting to use really pejorative and aggressive styles of language, something to the effect, to the effect of like, yeah, well, you just think that because you're a fucking towel head, right? And I was to be a party or witness to that, I would not make the attempt to tell that person that they can't use that language, because they can use that language. But I would be prone to saying something in that situation of, do you think that comments like that are helping this conversation move forward? And that person may look at me and say, why don't you go fuck yourself? They might say something like that to me. But what I've done in this situation now is at least turned a spotlight for everyone else there on this behavior. So that person can continue to engage in that type of behavior, but it has now been framed a little bit more for what it is. And people can take that with it as much of a grain of salt as they want to. I actually think that it is good to let people put their biases and their prejudices on display. I would much rather have somebody's feelings and sentiments in that direction be openly aired and in the public, because then we can assess how to deal with that situation or that person, as opposed to them harboring secret prejudices and biases that then play themselves out in very nasty and extremely difficult to identify ways.
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers, any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument?
That other guy already established that everybody knows that subscriber count is what helps you get laid. No, I'm kidding. They don't have anything to do with the argument.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms?
I don't actually even really understand this question. What does the use of icons or people's handles have to do with any of the arguments that they make? Are you aware that people in this video have used icons instead of their own faces? I mean, I just don't, what is the actual objection here, and how is it relevant to the substance of any argument that anybody might put forth, whether they're on the SJW side or the anti-SJW side?
Are you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people?
Assuming that I had a noteworthy amount of fans, I can pretty confidently say yes to this. I have personally done this in previous YouTube videos that I have produced, where I've asked people politely at the end of my videos to please feel free to engage in conversation. Try to keep it polite, but I would not go into my comments, and unless somebody was posting spam or spammy links, but I wouldn't go into my comment section, for example, and delete somebody's comments.
And I don't mean these tiny disclaimers that you put under the description fold or flash for 2 seconds at the beginning of the video that nobody reads.
First, you can control your own behavior and set an example by not engaging in that type of activity or language or conversation your own self. Second, you can implore that the people who are your fans use some modicum of civility when speaking and addressing one another. But at the end of the day, nobody controls all of their fans. They are not responsible for their fans. And when we begin to say, well, you put a message at the beginning of your YouTube video, but that's not enough. Now you have to also say something, and then you need to put it in the comments, and then you need to start censoring the comments, and then you need to openly and admonish anything that you think crosses this line. We are just going straight down a slippery slope to more and more and more and more and more and more and more until we are, in fact, engaging in acts of censorship on another person.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
So I find this kind of a silly question, especially given that most online harassment is female on female harassment. But I will confess to having some difficulty telling whether or not this is actually supposed to be a serious question, because who would make such an absurd statement as to say something to the effect of no feminist ever get harassed online? Like, that seems like a silly statement for anybody to make, and I am hard-pressed to think that somebody actually believes that.
Do you understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research?
Well, I am definitely familiar with the concept that the greater the body of evidence there is behind a scientific theory, the more robust that theory is. So, yes, I get that. I can't speak for everybody else. I definitely agree that it's pretty annoying when people go and look up an article that makes a reference to this one paper that has a really terrible samples for the study, and, it's poorly worded questions. I mean, I get that. And it's really frustrating when people are like, boom, here's an article. Ah, gotcha. It's pretty annoying when people do that and they don't have any ability to critically analyze what has actually gone into that study, where it falls, in a greater body of things. So yeah, I think I get what you're saying, and I would agree that it's pretty annoying when people do that. I think they do it on both sides of the fence.
If you identify as an egalitarian, then I'm interested in your take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
Pull that bus over to the side of the pretentiousness turnpike, all right?
I feel like this question is pretty unscrupulous and condescending, because I'm pretty sure that most people don't have a copy of this bad boy just laying around on their coffee table, and when they go out to tailgates and parties, they strike up conversation about convoluted philosophical concepts like what is the veil of ignorance and the original position, and how do I think about them? It seems like this question was very disingenuously asked, because when you make a video, the premise of which is to ask serious questions, hypothetically, in order to get serious input and to open true dialogue, you do not throw out a lofty question as if everybody has the knowledge of what this sophisticated philosophical concept is. And in doing so, without giving any context to your audience, it doesn't really speak to the spirit of actually trying to have a dialogue so much as trying to ask a question to your audience that you think they're going to be too stupid to answer. As somebody who does think of herself as something of an egalitarian and a humanitarian, my opinion on the original position and the veil of ignorance is that it's a good tool for evaluation. I think that fundamentally it can fly directly in the face of Lockean philosophy when it comes particularly to ideas of possession and ownership and rights. And so I am unconvinced that it is a sound or good basis for building systems off of.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom?
Personally, I'm not. I'm pretty hardcore for academia and science and research and studies. I feel in watching this original, these questions that you guys have posed, that I probably watch a lot of YouTubers to which these types of questions you're asking would be addressed. I feel as though I see from them this exact question, like they have this exact same perspective about people who are feminists and SJWs. Why do SJWs want to quash unpopular opinions and stop studies that might produce results that run contrary to their narrative? That is a common theme that anti-SJWs are usually harping on about in their videos. And so it's sort of interesting to me that you here on the, SJW side of things are asking exactly the same question. And I wonder what has led you to ask this, to bring this question up. Pardon me here a little bit. I have had a sudden sneezing fit, so I'm suddenly super stuffy and my eyes are really red and itchy. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I think that really probably sums up what I found to be the most sincere questions out of the whole bunch, and some of them I really wish that I could have answered more comprehensively, but I wanted to at least, give it a go. If you enjoy my videos, please give thumbs up, and I look forward to the discussion down in the low bar and seeing what everybody has to say, and I will see you all on the flip side.